Resuming debate to the Honourable Member for Lakeland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's a pleasure to follow the formidable MP and my friend from Peterborough, Kawartha. Like all Conservatives, we come from different parts of the country and from different backgrounds, but like all Conservatives in our big and growing movement, we are united with our Conservative leader to fight to axe the carbon tax, to bring down food and fuel prices and heating and cooling costs for all Canadians, to bring homes Canadians can afford and bring home Canadian jobs, money, businesses, and natural resource development and exports. Conservatives will bring project approvals up, the cost of traditional energy down, greenlight green technology, and ensure major projects and infrastructure can actually get built in this country again so all Canadians can have accessible, affordable, reliable fuel and power, and most importantly, hope for the future. Our leader and Conservatives warned the NDP-Liberal government repeatedly during the past 8 years that their reckless tax, spending, and inflationary deficit agenda would drive investment out of Canada and make everything more expensive for everyone. Only a few months, actually, after the first time I was elected to be the MP and to represent the people of Lakeland in response to the 2016 budget, even I myself warned of the dangers of this regressive, repressive tax before the Liberals imposed it. I said then, and it's clearly true today, that the carbon tax is just a revenue generator for government to feed reckless spending and out-of-control deficits masquerading as environmental policy. But these NDP Liberals have traded on all Canadians' deep concern and care for the environment to cover their obvious cash grab. The proof is in the most difficult ways. Almost a decade into their irresponsible, harmful experiments, it's been all economic pain and no environmental gain for Canadians. But of course, the MP who predicted everything about the consequences of the NDP Liberal agenda was our leader, the MP for Carleton, in his previous role as the official opposition finance shadow minister. But you know what? What's remarkable is that he also warned of the risk and the cost back in 2007, 16 years ago, about the Liberals' plan to implement a carbon tax that he warned would cost everyday Canadians thousands and thousands of dollars that they wouldn't be able to afford. He's always opposed it, and we still do. Inflation, rising interest rates, skyrocketing prices for essentials like gas, groceries, and home heating. Conservatives warned about the connections of all of these policies. We warned that the dreams of new and young Canadians would be compromised and undermined by the NDP Liberal policies that always do, in real terms, the very opposite of what they claim. The NDP Liberals, they like to say, well, they'll take no lessons from Conservatives or from our leader, but really, they should have. It would have saved all Canadians years of struggles, bankruptcies and foreclosures, anxiety, catastrophic losses of generational opportunities, hundreds of thousands of job losses, billions in investment, and a brain drain to other countries, allies and foes alike. It's a tragic hindsight that it's obvious that they really should have listened. Canadians remember their May 2015 promise that they'd help the middle class and those working hard to join it. But the facts are stark, and they're pesky things for politicians like the Prime Minister, who doesn't keep their word or take responsibility. And when you've been in power, when he's been in power for almost a decade, it is time for him to answer for it. Because the truth is that under the previous Conservative government, more Canadian kids and vulnerable families were lifted out of poverty than at any other time in our country's history, and Canada's middle class became the richest middle class on any country on earth in 2014. At that time, it really was sunny skies ahead. But today, what's happened? Well, the Liberals have actually moved the way their government measures the poverty line to pretend their policies have worked. And the middle class is dwindling because the vast majority of Canadians can't pay their bills and cover their essential costs, and more Canadians are falling behind after 8 years of this Prime Minister and his NDP Liberal government. The truth is, there's just no honest way to skirt the fact that the NDP Liberals' carbon taxes have very real, punitive, and burdensome impacts on everyday Canadians. In Lakeland, the NDP Liberals' carbon tax will cost people nearly $4,000 a year in the next 6 years. The consequence is that Canadians everywhere, of course, not just in Lakeland, are struggling to make ends meet, to put food on their tables, to fuel their vehicles, to heat and cool their homes and businesses. In the vast majority of our country, there just isn't other immediately available and affordable options for Canadians. They're left with no choice. They are squeezed by all sides, and it's at a breaking point after 8 years of this Prime Minister and his NDP-Liberal policies. So the Liberals can spin all they want to dig in and stubbornly justify their harmful agenda, but the independent parliamentary budget officer confirms what we warned, that the NDP-Liberal carbon tax hikes the cost of literally everything, which is why 80% of Canadians pay more than they will ever get back from these Liberals, exactly as we said. But the independent PBO also found that the tax hasn't actually reduced emissions since it was imposed. It's a cash grab. It's also not a bug, not an accident, not an unintended consequence. It's a feature of their agenda. The Liberals themselves admitted that their carbon tax is meant to make driving more expensive, and they're plowing ahead to quadruple those costs and add a second carbon tax on top of it. Together, those taxes will hike prices at the pumps by 61 cents a litre in the next 7 years. I mean, seriously, who can afford this? There isn't a light at the end of the tunnel for most Canadians under these NDP Liberals, who are totally out of touch, and now, exactly as we warned, Canadians are out of money. Canadians aren't sitting around hoping the government that claims it's here to help will make it totally impossible for them to afford to drive and to heat their homes, but it's actually exactly what the NDP Liberals and Bloc want to do and are doing. And as we warned, it's hurting the working poor, people on fixed incomes, rural and remote Canadians, Indigenous communities, and people, especially in rural regions in the West and Atlantic Canada, the most, because of the differences of realities of the various regions and provinces. And Canadians in our biggest cities can hardly even afford to rent a single room in a single house. It's thousands of dollars alone. They can't keep up with soaring inflationary deficit spending caused interest rates hikes that are pushing their rent and mortgages out of reach. We also warned all about this in 2016. It's not a pleasure at all to tell the NDP Liberals that we told them so, because of all the pain and anger and anxiety that they've caused. But they also can't pretend Conservatives didn't. Gordy from Cullenton, a village of 170 people near Athabasca, in a beautiful area where the landscape shifts to rolling hills and more lakes and gives way to the treasured and beautiful boreal forest that spans throughout northern Alberta. He wrote me and said his daughter and her husband have 4 kids, and this is the crucial and horrible part that will be familiar to most Canadians. They both have good-paying jobs, but by the time they pay for rent, gas, power, heating, his family has to skimp on groceries or choose to not pay some bills, which we all know often ends up in a spiral people can't escape. This isn't just happening in Lakeland. It's a common reality, and it's a travesty that Canadians now face after almost a decade of this Prime Minister in both urban and rural communities alike and every region of the country. You know, Ron from Bonnyville, he never contacted my office before, but he recently did because he needed to tell me about the dire situation with his gas bill. He said, quote, "We are paying more than 100% tax on the small amount of gas we are using. If it's supposed to be for the amount of CO2 generated by the burning of the gas, something's definitely wrong here. What happens in winter when the gas bill is $100 or more? Are we going to be gouged over $100 for the tax as well?" This is an unfair tax charged to Canadian citizens. He says, what about the seniors on fixed incomes? They can't afford this kind of charge. Right. Well, it was minus 52 for a couple of weeks in my backyard last Christmas, so it's obvious why Ron is worried. But he's just one of the 4 out of every 5 Canadians who will pay more in carbon tax than they get back, while nearly half of Canadians are forced to borrow for basics, just for basics, and have no emergency savings. More than ever before, 20% of Canadians are skipping meals, and 7 million struggle to put food on their tables. 69% of seniors have to postpone their retirement because of these NDP Liberal policies. All of this in a first world country blessed with all the human capital and abundant natural resources that underpin our entire economy. If only this government would stop red taping and gatekeeping all of it in the ground. What a disgrace. This isn't really a theoretical debate either. What Conservatives are saying is true. It's happening in real time. It's literally how things work. When an out-of-touch, out-of-ideas government taxes the farmer and ranchers who grow the food, tax the processors and all the agri-food businesses making the food, tax the truckers who ship the food, tax the store that sells the food, taxes the people who buy the food, which is literally all of us because we all need to eat, who are also taxed on their own fuel and home heating. The consequences is Canadians can't cover the basics. They can't afford to eat. For what? Well, no one can really answer that anymore because there's no proven or discernible impact on emissions reduction. Emissions have increased every year in the past 8 years, except when all Canadians were locked down by COVID. Conservatives will axe the carbon tax to bring prices and costs down for Canadians. They can have hope for the future. We'll turn hurt into hope. The NDP-Liberals should be ashamed of themselves, and it's clearly not worth the cost.
It is really past time. Questions and comments. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I appreciate the commentary from my colleague from Lakeland in Alberta. I love Alberta. I visit often. Always enjoy a warm reception when I'm there. But there's a couple of things that I take umbrage with in her speech, namely child poverty rates. Madam Speaker, child poverty rates in 2015, when this government took office, Canada was ranked 24th in the OECD, and today, thanks to the Canada Child Benefit, Canada is ranked second. There's more work to be done. Madam Speaker, a Calgary-based economist looked into the price of carbon pricing on a grocery bill for a family of four. Trevor Tome found that carbon pricing adds about $5 to a monthly grocery bill for a family of four in Alberta, $2 for a family in Ontario. So the rhetoric around $4,000 to $6,000 a year, which is false from the member, also ignores the fact that there's a $386 quarterly payment through the climate action incentive, something that the Conservatives never want to acknowledge. That's $1,444 that helps the least well-off Albertans the most. The member from Lakeland
I have to give the Honourable Member the chance to answer the question. The Honourable Member for Lakeland.
I don't know why these Liberals keep asking me this question, since I was a very strong internal and then later external critic of that policy. I didn't run on it, and the person who put it forward unilaterally is no longer here because Conservative caucus made an extremely difficult but principled decision, and we will axe the carbon tax. But you know what? I think that these Liberals should just keep right on saying that Canadians have never had it better, that their agenda is working, that it's so easy and so good for Canadians. And we will, like my colleague said, remain the only party in this House of Commons who wants to make life affordable, who wants to bring prices and costs down for all Canadians, and who wants to give every single Canadian hope for the future that they deserve.
Questions et commentaires.
Questions and comments.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton. Transcone.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's difficult because I sit next to the member for Edmonton or for Winnipeg Transcona. I'd like to thank my colleague for her speech today in the House, and ultimately the carbon tax is about a climate change measure. It's part of a climate change plan, and what I dislike is that this, in fact, is not enough of a conversation about how we deal with the climate crisis that's happening. We need to be dealing with it with multiple ways, and I'm sure she'll agree with me when I say that the Liberals have met none of their targets with the plan, and so there needs to be an even broader conversation on how to deal with it. But I have one very easy question for her. The member of her party from South Shore St. Margaret this afternoon said that hurricanes have been happening for hundreds of years in his riding, and that wildfires are man-made. Does she believe climate change is real? Does she believe wildfires are a result of climate change?
Honourable Member for Lakeland.
Well, this is the issue. The NDP-Liberals claim that their carbon tax is in place to reduce emissions, even though, by the way, the model that they've imposed actually doesn't reflect anything near what economists who propose carbon taxes for emissions reductions actually propose, which is an equivalent reduction in red tape taxes to offset the price, and then also to have exemptions for for emissions-intensive trade-exposed industries. The truth is that model's not even up for debate. It's not what the Liberals have done. It's not what the NDP-Liberals support. support. So I think that it's their job to explain to Canadians how this is possibly worth the cost. And they need to tell Canadians how high the prices have to go before they're actually going to see a difference.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I will ask the question, the very simple yes or no question to my colleague. Is climate change real or not?
Member for Lakeland.
Conservatives will take action to reduce emissions globally by exporting our technology, our products, to help our allies get off dictator oil, to ensure Canadians' energy self-sufficiency and security, and so that we can support our allies, because energy security, self-sufficiency, and sustainability dictates the prices of food, dictates the standard of living, and it's a crucial thing for this country to secure that has absolutely been languished and lost, I fear, generationally under these NDP Liberals.